She was like, how are people affording this? That's the difference. Right. You can't bring wages to a wealth fight.
You know what I've really come to appreciate? Inconvenience.
Wanted a life where I could be as rich as possible and as regular as possible. Yeah. I still wanted to be able to go to Target. I didn't want to be removed from the funny parts of life. Like, I just didn't want to feel like I was in this bubble.
It's like, yeah, you're right. I did have balsamic chicken with roasted Brussels sprouts and sweet potatoes for lunch. And I got it from Aldi.
These ain't designer chicken. And I'm very fortunate that like my friend group is down to be flexible, because I know a lot of people that are still running the same play from 2019, but it costs 3 times as much.
Everything does. Cars, and cars have been so crazy. Like they go through the roof. For a while, used cars were more expensive than new cars. Like we've seen the value of even like electric vehicles spike and then drop, like in a short period of time. Like it's such a weird time, right? I remember there was a period where was it? It was eggs. Yeah. Eggs for a while. Like,
that's one of my most viral posts.
Oh, really?
When I said I was gonna give Bo an egg for losing his teeth.
Right.
I have no cash.
Right. Yeah. Nah. But it's to your point, man. It's everything. It's cars. It's houses. It's food for sure.
Yes.
It's clothes. Like everything is more expensive. I love when they publish these articles and they say, well, these things, and there'd be like some random stuff like oatmeal and like chocolate. Like, great. Like what?
Yeah, the price is down on pork. It's like, okay.
I'm not really looking to OD on pork right now. Like, yeah.
Roast beef prices are down.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's confusing because all we have is this label of inflation as the reason why. But now that we've been in it for what, 2-3 years, and Jerome ain't lowering the interest rates, now we know that it's more than just like inflation. It is inflation, but it's driven by a lot of different things. It's not just like supply chain issues because of COVID anymore.
And that for me was actually the really sad part. Not necessarily surprising, but when they came out and realized that, yeah, I mean, for a while it was inflation.
like supply-driven inflation.
Yeah, but then they took inflation and ran with it. And I was like, you know, like if you guys are willing to pay this, then why not? Let's see what else you're willing to pay for.
It got confusing because you're right. Originally it was supply-driven, where just stuff wasn't coming in. Supply chains and docks and
it was stuck in the middle of the Atlantic.
Stuck in the middle of the Atlantic. So if you wanted something, you had to pay a premium because there was fewer of it. Then we got all that worked out, and it started mixing with some demand-driven inflation because people were revenge spending and doom spending and all the other things that we did once outside opened up again. You know, in Atlanta, outside was always open. But for the rest of the country, outside opened up at some point, and people spent all their savings, just went out and balled out. And then that created a different wave. And so now there's been some reports that say 50% of the inflation that we're experiencing right now is corporate driven.
Oh yeah.
For profits.
Yeah, they're trying to make up for the downtime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we called this on our podcast.
I was hoping.
we said this. And I still ain't, you know, I got that beef around that little 1-star review. Single, angry, unhinged 1-star review from somebody. And I literally think they meant it. Right? Like, I think he literally meant it. Yeah.
Was mad because we, our so-called thought leaders, blamed inflation on us and just completely missed the point. The point I was making, as you know, was that when the prices were raised, we continued to buy. They raised it again, we kept on buying. And so in a way, we sent an indicator to corporations that we could absorb the price hikes, which is why they kept on doing it over and over and over again. The only way you teach them that this is your ceiling is to stop buying stuff.
Correct.
So stop complaining about the price of eggs and start saying, well, I guess we're not having eggs.
Correct.
That's how you show the egg industry that actually, I'm not willing to pay $5 for the same egg. This is the bar.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that person got so mad. But you know what? I'm okay. Like I'm the bigger person in me is saying, you know what? It's good that somebody out there made a comment and lets you know that at least somebody was listening. Yeah. It is what it is. I will settle for my 4.9.
Yeah. You know, this is the hard part about being plugged in because it's not like these companies lie about it. The reason that we know that it was driven by corporations is because the earnings reports in 2022 were talking about how volume was down for companies like Frito-Lay and Coca-Cola. Volume was down, but they were able to make up for it because they raised the prices. This is what their CEOs are telling their investors, their shareholders, everybody on these earnings call, and that's what we said in the episode, where it's like companies are about to test the limits of pricing power. So you as a consumer, in order to not get taken advantage of, have to take your own power and develop a pricing sensitivity. And we talked about ways that you can comparison shop. We talked about some of the stuff that we were doing, but you only fight crazy with crazy.
But like, this is why frugality is so important, right? Because I feel like we've gone through this wave. Like there was a time where frugality was a virtue, and then it also became the F word. And now it's like, we're kind of going back to that a little bit where people are realizing like there's nothing wrong with having a nice meal at home, right? Like you have not all of a sudden, like it's not a punishment to eat at home or to shop at a different grocery store to be able to get the same thing at a lower price. I always use garbanzo beans for an example, right? Like as someone who is an Epicurean, right? Like I've got a pretty well-developed palate. I can't tell the difference between a cheap garbanzo bean and one that's twice the price.
Right.
And I could arguably say the same thing for pasta and rice and all of these other staples. And so I remember when we started to stop and take a look. You mentioned Whole Foods. There was a time where I used to take great pride in the fact that I shopped at Whole Foods, and I loved that experience, and I still like that experience. But now I literally only go there for about 2 things. I've completely reevaluated my spending. And so as people who are advantaged and privileged in a lot of ways, it was always wild to me to see how many people were absolutely unwilling to make that trade down, right? They seemed it as if, or they treated it as if that was like a huge step back. It was almost like taking a job with less money, you know? And it was like, no, we're just trying to keep the things together. You know what I mean? And I'm guarantee you, like your son might not know the difference between Fruit Loops and F-R-O-O-T Loops.
Fruit rings.
Fruit rings. Fruit rounds. They may not know the difference.
Sometimes you
and
do.
You might not either.
No, but that's real. I remember at the bus stop talking to another mom because she was so upset that she had just broken her new designer sunglasses. Like she had them, they fell out the car, or like, you know, and she blamed her son because he put them in the wrong spot and whatever. And I was just like, oh girl, that only had to happen to me one time. Like it only took me one time to lose a pair of designer sunglasses where I was just like, the under $20 ones are just fine. And I don't care if they get scratched. I don't care if they get messed up. They look the exact same from a distance. And if you all up in my face like that, then we better know each other. We better know each other real well.
Right. These are war times. These are war times.
Yes.
And we're finding that so many people are ill-equipped to fight back against inflation. You need to be able to tap into some routine of frugality, like some baseline level of getting the same versions of whatever it is that you're accustomed to without paying this ridiculous premium for it. because you need to be able to fight back in some way. Otherwise, you just completely relinquish control to corporate greed. This is also why investing is so important, because you also have to have some kind of stake in all of these things, right? Something that you're at least saying, well, you know what, I'm also benefiting
on the back end
from these companies who are raking in record profits, as opposed to not being invested and also not being willing to cut back.
Right.
I think we all know and understand the idea of living below your means, but I think we fall short of like really understanding what the goal is. It's not just enough to live below your means, it's to find a way to live below your means, and you've got to figure out a way to enjoy it. We were at this event and someone said they've never met anyone who couldn't spend less.
Yeah.
And my first thought, I'm not gonna lie, was like, wow, that's such an insensitive thing. Because like, I was thinking about, oh, well, there are the homeless, and of course they're blah, blah, blah. And it was like, those ridiculous exceptions aside, I have kind of graduated into that world where I too believe that we have just reached such a ridiculous point of excess that the idea of cutting back feels like a freedom is being taken away from you.
Yes.
And it's like, how did we get here?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, we got here because of consumerism, right? Like, what happens is, and I see this a lot with women, because women always get judged more than men.
I'm about to say, you about to get attacked just for saying that.
Oh my gosh, like, why she got her nails done if she got a GoFundMe, whatever it is. But there's a lot of people who will defend the fact that that means that is a form of happiness, that is a form of fulfillment. Everybody deserves the ability to be pampered and taken care of. And it's a really warped version of consumerism. We've commodified self-care, where we make it seem like there aren't free ways to build off that same deserving. Like, there aren't free ways to accomplish that same level of pampering or that same level of peacefulness. It doesn't always have to be an exchange of money, but you can't say that. Like, people are not willing to hear that. Like, if you criticize somebody's items or things or living situation, you're automatically a hater, or you're automatically someone who
an elitist.
You're privileged, or just because such and such, like it just becomes this devolved conversation, and you don't even get to the part where you're just like, no, but there are services, there are coupons, there are people and students who are learning how to do that thing that can help you. Like, there are ways to subsidize the things that you need in your life, even if you're not cutting back. I understand that, like, people might be on a bare bones budget. They need to supplement. We should supplement using the community service organizations that are out there with other things. It reminds me of why I've never taken up financial coaching. I'm not saying I'll never do it. There you go.
But I don't know that I can deal with someone telling me, like, throwing up their hands and saying, like, there's nothing I can do, I've done everything. And it's like, that's, in most cases, that's flat out bullshit. It's bullshit. You know what I mean? What you're saying is, you want a way to save more that does not affect you in any way, right? You want a frictionless, harmless, sacrificeless pathway to saving and investing that allows you to still do all of the things that you currently enjoy. And to me, that's like one of the biggest indicators of like a lack of self-accountability, right? You're seeking help, but you're framing up your situation in a way that makes it seem completely impossible, and then you're giving it to somebody else. Well, you tell me how to untie this knot. How am I supposed to continue to travel, live in an expensive part of town, drive an expensive car, and do all of that on $50,000?
Yes.
It's like, you can't.
Yeah.
Universal law, math. That's not me. That's just how it works. You've got to be willing to make some trade-offs, some sacrifices. And I think now we're just at that point where like you said, if you say those things, it's like almost like you're like insulting people or you're demeaning them. And it's like, I'm not. Like, you asked for help. And even if you did, like, that's just a reasonable thing to believe. But we've just reached this point where, like, everyone believes that they deserve the best of everything and all of the different choices, even though they're not even really sure how they're going to pay for it.
Yeah, like a good coach is going to close that gap for you. Like, a good coach is going to say, or a therapist or whoever you've hired, a good coach is going to say, okay, well, then there's a gap between your stated goal and what you actually want to do, right? And they're supposed to close that gap by helping you to focus on more specific goals. If not being willing to sacrifice or make trade-offs is the thing that's stopping you from, then that's the new goal, is to learn how to make trade-offs, learn how to make calculated risks, learn how to identify what you actually value, and then we can move on to what the financial outcome is. But we have to start with the behavior, and a lot of people don't do that. They want to skip and go straight to like the shiny goal. But you got to do that inner work. Otherwise, it's going to be a problem for you.
Yeah, and you brought up happiness, right? Like, it was this, there's this assumption that these are the things that make me happy, which is, I do understand that part, because when you don't have something and you have all these really deep longing desires for these things, like, that's all you can think about. You know what I mean? Like, it's almost like you can't breathe until you have those things. But this is why we say there's so much that can be learned and unlocked through having better conversations about money, is because if you have more real, transparent conversations with people who have those things, that bigger house, that nicer, more expensive car, and those people are actually being honest with you, they'll tell you, in more cases than not, it's actually not really what I thought it was, man. Like, trust me, like, stay where you are. Don't worry about it. Like, this car is really, really expensive to repair or to upkeep, or living over here is great, but you got to deal with all these other things. Or I've actually been to that place and you're right, the photo was cool, but man, if I could do it all over again, I don't know that I would have spent thousands of dollars to get there, you know? And I think there's so many people who just aren't being honest and aren't being transparent. They're continuing to maintain this lie, basically, for how nice it is to live like XYZ. Even though deep down they know it's really frustrating, and they kind of wish that it was a little bit more right size. Not necessarily smaller or even less expensive, but just right size. Because like, what comes with having all the things is all the things that come with those things. The bills, the maintenance, the cost of ownership, like the maintenance of it all.
I'm glad you brought it up, because that's what conversations with people who have the things you think you want will reveal. They will reveal the difference between the price and the cost. I remember we put that in the book as a ritual. Like, you need to stop asking yourself, can you afford it? You need to ask, at what cost? Because cost is a very different metric. There is price, and by price standards alone, a lot of people can qualify for things that they can't actually afford. That's what our credit system does, and that's what keeps people locked into jobs and careers and in financial situations that are always stressful. If you can train yourself to think about the cost of something, and this is what Vicki Robbins talks about in Your Money or Your Life, where it's like, there's a cost anytime you exchange money, whether it is, interest on a credit card, extra days or years at work, the inability to cover an emergency. Like, there's very real costs, and if you can calculate that on the front end, it makes saying no so much easier. Like, you're not even pressed, because it's not in your budget. You can't afford, like, you can't do it.
It's actually one of the things that make me happy about the new loud budgeting trend, because at least there just seems to be a general acceptance and a willingness to say, I ain't got it. I ain't got it. You know what I've really come to appreciate recently? Seriously? Inconvenience.
Really?
Yeah.
You know what?
Inconvenience, it feels like, it's like a healthy level of friction in my life, right? Like it's not like everything comes easily, everything is just like smooth, I don't have to think about it. Like I have actually come to appreciate, like there's a healthy level of inconvenience that I think is required in order to actually appreciate ease.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's like you have to wait in line a little bit.
You do. You need something to compare it to.
You gotta be able to wait and just know that, man, like the coffee is gonna be better if you let it sit for a second, or if you just, you know, the pizza is super hot coming out the oven, but you gotta, if you bite it now, you're gonna regret it. Like inconvenience to me, and even if it's like little things, like just cars or houses, like just little things that just give you something to talk about. You know what I mean? As opposed to having everything you could ever want. Like that to me is not happiness. And I can say this, like we've been pretty far down that road before. I remember even on our honeymoon where, you know, we designed like every single day, every moment, like nah, we're gonna ball out. And I think we called it luxury fatigue. After a while, it was like, man, I really just want like a regular sandwich. Like, I think I'm a little luxed out right now. Like, I want the cheapest thing. And come to find out, one of our best meals was exactly that. Like, literally somewhere in Soweto, underneath, what was it, Orlando Towers. A simple braai. And it was one of the best meals that we had. And it was like $7 or something like that. And it was like, little stuff like that, you know? So whether it's a honeymoon or even just in your everyday life, I have just come to appreciate a little bit of inconvenience, because it's almost like your body needs to, and your brain needs to be tempered a little bit before you get that satisfaction hit. And without that, you just stay up here. And you don't feel anything up there, right? Like that moment, those moments are supposed to be temporary for a reason, and then you gotta come back down so that you can get back onto the hunt for that pleasure again. Like, but that to me is kind of something, I don't know, can you relate to that? Or?
Yes, yeah. It's funny because as you're talking, I'm thinking about Jamie Foxx, and I think it was him and Eddie Murphy. One of them was coming back to stand up. But he's like, how do, you know, I said, well, Eddie, if you want to get into it, I could help you. They were worried that they were losing their funniness. First thing I do, you gotta fix your house. He's like, what you mean? Your stuff too nice. I said, your house too perfect.
I was about to say, you're right. You're removed.
Candles scented and all that shit. I said, Eddie, at my crib, I have shit at my house that doesn't work on purpose. Stuff is too nice. Like, you need something to complain about. Like, that's where humor comes from. It comes from observing things that are not quite right. Like, that's where an appreciation for the things that are nice comes from, is you have something to compare it to.
It was like, oh, I didn't even know that they made floors that don't creak.
Yeah, like the first time you sit in first class, you're like, wow, this is nice. No middle seat, a hot towel. But if you do it on a regular basis, you experience the same inconveniences as everybody else, and it's not special anymore, even though you're paying twice, and now it's like 3-4 times as much. Like the gap between first class and coach is crazy. But yeah, you need that contrast. That's important in all things. And that's what the happiness industry is not telling you. They have us chasing happiness as if it is something that we can catch and hold on to and like make it the primary emotion of our lives. But there has been tons and tons of research that there are other things that make for a more meaningful and interesting life. And so at some point, I was chasing happiness too. Like at some point I had to ask myself, if I don't want a happy life, then what kind of life do I want? And that's really where Rich and Regular came from. I wanted a life where I could be as rich as possible and as regular as possible. I still wanted to be able to go to Target. I didn't want to be removed from the funny parts of life. I wanted to still be relatable to my cousins and my people. Like, I just didn't want to feel like I was in this bubble. I wanted to have the financial peace of mind to not have to worry about money every day, but I didn't want to lose the social aspect. And so that's where the lifestyle, the aesthetic, the brand, the approach to money came from, was this goal of like, I if I'm not chasing happiness, what else am I chasing? And come to find out, you don't have to chase it at all.
You know, when you go back to your mama's house, your daddy's house, or your aunties or your uncles, and you see that old photo album, and at some point somebody calls out somebody's uncle who used to have you had the 80s, you had the 75 Eldorado, or you had the clean cutlets, you had the new, right? Like we all go through that period. We're like, damn. At some point, you be like, well, what happened to it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like most things, right? There's a spectrum. On one end, you have luxury, and on the other, you got like frugality. But like, you can stretch it a little further, and then you've got extreme frugality and extreme luxury, and that's what I think we see too much of, right? Yeah. So the reason why people are fighting back against the idea of extreme frugality is because like that, they say that that's completely unreasonable, and they're right. But the same is true over here, right? The idea that everyone is going to be traveling abroad, going first class, you know, ordering all of the finest things, staying at the best hotels, or driving the nicest cars, or living, the idea that so few people can tolerate anything that's like less than that, because that's the bar, is just obscene to me. And it's like, whatever happened to like the in-between? And we used to have a much sort of slimmer, or, you know, smaller, less extreme spectrum, and now all we're seeing is one or the other. And so to me, that was like also one of the elements of what we wanted Rich and Regular to stand for. And it was like, yeah, you're right. I did have balsamic chicken with roasted Brussels sprouts and sweet potatoes for lunch. And I got it from Aldi. I got it from my Costco
These ain't designer
that
chicken.
I do once a month. No, it's the same chicken that you got. I just know how to cook it. You know what I mean?
I was talking to my hairstylist about this because she was planning her 40th birthday, and the prices for where she wanted to go were just like crazy. And she was like, how are people affording this? And I was like, see, that's the difference.
They're not.
That's the difference. You can't bring wages to a wealth fight. They are not using their income, right? They're not using their job income. These are business owners, these are asset owners, these are investors who are enjoying the spoils of the returns that they've gotten, and that's what they're using. And so it's not apples to apples. It's not a matter of how are people affording this. It's, can I afford it?
Right.
Is there somewhere else I can go for my birthday, or another way for me to celebrate? And I think more people just need to grapple with that realization that it's not just people that are affording these things. Like, it's the same customer that understands that the bar had to move if they wanted to keep their luxury experience luxury.
I like that. Well, you can't bring wages to a wealth fight. Cheers to that.
Cheers.